just the US.
Yep.
There's also cards on the table.
Okay, so to start out, I've got a plunker that I'm going to go over, and it has a link to this presentation, and it's at that address right there. So if you'd like to follow along, check out the code. That's where you go. My name is Ken Snyder. On GitHub, I'm Ken Snyder. Okay, so today we're going to go through 3 directives, and we're going to talk about where JQLite ends and where jQuery begins. So by a show of hands, how many people use jQuery with their Angular? Okay, good. Sounds good. So hopefully this is helpful for everybody, so you can kind of see what to do when you feel like you need jQuery, but maybe you don't really need jQuery yet. So the first thing we're going to do is an auto contrast directive. So the use case is there's some kind of dashboard. The user is customizing the color of the background of something, but we want the text to be readable. So we want the text to either be white or black, depending on the contrast or the background color they've chosen. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the element's background color, and then we're going to do some equations to check for contrast ratio, and then we're going to set the color to either white or black. Okay, so in jQLite, you can get the background color of something doing .css, right? Well, the problem is it only works on inline styles. So if inside your application there's CSS that is referring to it, it might not even be background color, it might be background that has the color in it. jQuery won't be able to read that. jQuery can, and so you might go, oh crap, now I gotta get jQuery or else I'm gonna have to write all of this crap. So I'll just get jQuery. So let's talk about a real simple way that we can do it without. Okay, so we're gonna go over to the plunker here, and we're gonna look at the file, auto contrast. Okay, let me get this bigger. Is that big enough to see? Okay, so basically all we have is we have a bunch of backgrounds here, some divs that are different colors, and we've made our simple directive here on each div. So what we want the directive to do is decide whether to put the text as white or black. So you can see the result of it right there. That's what we're trying to get to. So if you look at the CSS, you can see that we've actually just set background color with the background, short syntax. So if we try to read that with jQLite, it's not going to work. Even if it was background-color, jQLite still couldn't get it because it's not inline. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the directive. So here's the directive. Okay, so normally this is where you would call, jQuery and say CSS background color. But what we can do is just this built-in DOM function called getComputeStyle. Now this is just a regular window, just bringing it in from the jQuery way, so it's not, so you can unit test it better, but it would be the same thing. So then we take the element that we're doing the directive on, and what we get back is this object, and this object allows us to get the property style of anything. So in this case, we want to get the property style of background color. So the background color comes in this kind of format, RGB or RGBA, and we are using these math functions here to get the contrast. They're saying the contrast between white and the background color, we want it to be at least 4.5, which I guess is the WC recommendation for contrast on your page. So if it's greater, then we do white. If it's less, then we do black. So that was really easy, right? Just all you got to know is window.getComputedStyle. It looks like this not going to run. Oh, that's so sad. Sure. There we go. So the getComputedStyle is pretty cool. You can get pretty much any style. The downside is that's i9 plus, but the upside is that's what Angular is. So you're fine. You can use it anytime you want. Any questions on that? Who's used getComputedStyle before? Yeah, see, now you can use it. It's real easy. Okay. So the next one is directive is called auto patch. And so I had a client recently and they said, I want forms, but I want no save buttons. I want just as I type, I leave the field, I want to save. So auto save. So using an API endpoint, I just said, well, every time you focus out or change a select or whatever like that, then we're just going to call a patch to the resource and patch one field. It works. So that was the use case. So what we need to do is we want to be able to put an auto patch with the URL to the resource to patch. And then anything inside that form or that div, all the inputs and text areas and selects, we want those after each change, we're going to run HTTP patch. And to be fancy, we're going to indicate saving with a green background. So if you need to find all of the elements inside, what do? Well, JQLite element find won't work. It'll only do tag names. So if you need to do selectors or make sure that it has an ng model property, you're out of luck. So you think, oh no, I got to bust out jQuery. No, it's easy. Okay, so we're going to open up Plunker again. This time we're going to look at the auto patch directive. So here's our auto patch. So we put this just on the outer element here, and this is the resource to patch to. And then inside of it, we've got some inputs here. And the ng model here, we're going to assume to patch the field called name, email, or GitHub. So check it out. So it does a nice little thing, does the patch, uses CSS3 to do a little transition, and it's all magic. So let's look at the CSS real quick. I guess nothing fancy, just indicate that we're saving. Any questions so far? Okay. So we've got our element, and we want to get all the things underneath. So in this case, we want to get the input that has an ng model attribute and the text areas that have an ng model attribute. And so what we can do is we can do query selector all. So that's easy. So then you're like, oh, but then with query selector all, I got to do a for loop, and I just hate writing for loops all the time because you can't say for each on this query selector all results because it returns a node list. So one thing that's really easy, and this is awesome to remember, is to use an empty array.forEach.call. And so the first parameter is the thing that you want to iterate over. So in this case, it's a node list that query selector all return. And then you send it a function that you want to call each time. So we got this input in here, and we just want to check for the change. So anytime that input changes, we want to run the patch function. So we could just, do Angular element on, but hey, we don't need to. This works in IE 9+. Add event listener, change, patch, false, we're done. And so you can see the patch function. What it does, the main thing it does here is it patches to the URL that was passed in and whatever data. So the data was the name or email or GitHub, and then the value of the input. And hey, we didn't even have to use angular.element.val. You can just get the value. Now, if you're working with a select, you'll probably want to use angular.element, but for just these text areas and inputs, just .value. That's great. And then just for the demo, normally you would say .success, but it's not going to work on Plunker. There's no patching. So when it's done, we say, well, let's wait a little while to make sure they saw the green, and then we can remove the saving class. And notice here, we're not using Angular element add class and remove class. There's this really cool thing called class list. So every element has a class list property, and the class list has 3 methods: add, remove, contains, and toggle, 4 methods. So when we want to add green, we just say .add, and we want to remove it, .remove. Super easy. So we learned query selector all. We learned for each call. We learned class list. So just review. This is something you could do all the time. It's really great. Sometimes I'll do it on other websites. Just go into the control panel. I need to scrape some information off there. Go to DevTools and do the for each call. I don't have to worry about if they have jQuery on the page or anything. Don't have to write for loops. So in the case that we did, everything besides query selector all, we could have just done Angular element. But we just said we don't need that. We can do add event listener. We can do class list. Now class list only works in IE 10, so think about that one. But it's nice. It's easy. So you don't have to wrap everything in the Angular.element. Sometimes you're just cool working with the DOM. Okay, so the last one. Any questions on that one? So the last one we're going to talk about is draggable. So the use case for this is just for academic purposes. There's other libraries that do draggable better. There's even the HTML5 drag interface, which is kind of clumsy, but anyway, I wanted to do it because it seems like it's really complex to have some draggable thing, but it's not. And you don't even need jQuery. So there's 5 parts to the draggable. You may not know this, but when you click, there's actually 3 events. There's mouse down, mouse up, and as soon as both of those are done, then click. So what we're saying is when you go to mouse down, that's where you start to drag, right? Mouse down, and then you can drag around the page. So when we do that, though, we need to get the initial offset of the thing, of the div, relative to the body, so they can move it around relative to the body. Each time they do a mouse move, then we're going to make the position change. And when they do a mouse up, then we end the drag. And we're also going to get a little crazy here and add feedback to the user using opacity. So when they're dragging it, it's half opaque. Okay, so you're like, okay, I need to get the offset relative to the window. Let me just use element offset. Yeah. Well, that doesn't exist. So if you wanted that, you'd have to use jQuery. But hey, it's really not that hard. We're going to do something instead. So this is the last one on the plunker here. We're going to look at draggable. Okay, so our draggable here, we just have this little panel that has stock prices in it. Looks like that. And we want that whole little table to be draggable. So all we did was put on this directive, draggable. And so the draggable's got to make it draggable. So and this is the result it's supposed to do. Okay. So CSS, one thing to know about the CSS is that you want to use this user select, none. And that way they can't select the text. Because if you mouse down, it'll select the text and move it around. You don't want to do that. So we have the move cursor whenever you're over it, so you know you can move. And then we have it so you can't select the text in there. And you can maybe turn that on and off. So while they're not dragging, they can do it. I don't know, but just for the demo. Okay, so here's what the directive looks like. Okay, so all we're doing to start off is adding mouse down. And let's look at our functions. So we have start drag, and that's when they mouse down. And then when they start mouse moving, then when we do the on move function, and when they're all done, they lift up or mouse up, then we call the drag function. So let's look at the start drag. So if we had jQuery, we would just use element offset. But there's a really cool thing here, just right on the element called get bounding client rect. So wherever that thing is on the page, however it's positioned, however what stacking order it is, whether it's moving CSS3, the bounding client rect will give you a an object with top, right, left, bottom. So you can find out exactly how big it is, where it is on the page, all that stuff. So first of all, we got to get that. So we also have to get the event. Okay, the event has two properties, page X and page Y. And that's so we know where on the element they actually started. So you start down here, or they might start here, right? And so we need to keep moving it with their cursor. So we get the page X, and then we subtract the offset that we got from get bounding client rect. And then one other thing we have to do is find out the scroll, the X scroll and the Y scroll, and the way to do that is page Y offset and page X offset. So that way, if we're scrolled in page, it still is in the right position when we start moving it. It'll be relative to the viewport. So then we need to listen. We need to say, okay, on mouse move, move it, and mouse up, end it. And for our fancy effect, we're going to set opacity to 0.5. So while we're moving here, what we're going to do is set the CSS. And all we need is where the cursor is. So every time the mouse move is triggered, you know where the cursor went. And then the start offset, which we got here at the top, we need to know that so that we can move it relative to where they started. And so nothing special here. You know, if you're using jQuery, you might say element.offset. But hey, you don't need to. You can just do CSS, top, left, add your px. So then on the in drag, you just stop observing mouse move and stop observing mouse up, and you make it opacity 1 again. So that was pretty easy. And it's kind of cool. Okay, so finish up here. So it gives you 4 integers. Doesn't have picks or anything like that, just 4 integers. Top left, bottom right. And then you also need to remember to do page X on the event and page Y on the event, so you can find out where the click, mouse up, whatever kind of mouse events, you always get a page X and page Y. You need to find out where that is. And then you need to know the page X offset and the page Y offset, and that's IE9 plus again, but we're good. We're good with that. So that's it. Now, those few things, you are a pro. Any other questions? Dimitri?
So many things are relatively easy to do with the vanilla DOM API, but it looks like as you develop something real, you can come across a lot of speed bumps, and you may not know where they are until you hit them. That's one thing. And another thing is that even if you know how to manipulate, classes, positions, stuff like that, the syntax seems kind of clunky, and you don't want to repeat yourself. So, are you suggesting a certain threshold as to whether do I want to use jQuery or whether I want to keep it simple?
I think if you're writing your own stuff, you can easily avoid jQuery. If you have to pull in libraries that do various things, sometimes they'll be jQuery dependent. The thing about it is, yeah, you do have to be a little adventuresome to learn some DOM stuff. And it's just been funny because, 5 years ago it wasn't worth learning all that stuff because you'd have to learn the IE7 way and the IE8 way and the IE9 way and then everybody else's way. But now it's really converging, right? There's so much stuff that you can do IE9 or IE10 plus that's really pretty easy. So I would say, for Angular itself, you shouldn't be doing a lot of stuff on the DOM, right? Everything is based around the idea that the DOM just kind of responds and is connected to your data. But you do need directives sometimes to do, kind of the example things that I showed you. So hopefully what you're doing with your directives is not crazy. If it is, then you might start to think maybe I'm doing something wrong. But that's just kind of my point of view, if you're not adventuresome, you don't mind, 63 kilobytes, by all means use jQuery, but don't be afraid to not use it. Any other questions?
Can I make a recommendation? So you might not need jQuery.com is a terrific resource for any time I'm like, I know how I do this in jQuery, how would I do this without? And it'll show you how you do it without jQuery. There's also you might need jQuery.com. So,
By the same person?
no, I don't think so. But yeah, so this is fantastic. You can even choose what version of IE you have to support, and it'll change what it tells you. So yeah, if you only
So you do like find.
Yeah, scroll down.
So that's cool. What about, let's see, CSS. Get computer style. So easy. Setting style, that's pretty easy. What else did we learn today? Oh, there's a for each. So, and what I showed here is instead of array.prototype, you can just use an empty array right there. Either way. Let's see what it says on offset. Oh, there you go. Get bounding client rec. Correct. And check the scroll. But if you're IE9 plus, yeah, Classlist.add. So beautiful. Of course, one gotcha about that is if you do a class list on any SVG element or child, IE10 doesn't support that for some reason. So, anyway. Cool. Well, thanks so much for letting me present. Sure.
Oh man, the resolution always throws you off. Holy cow, I can't see anything. Oh man, let's see if I can fix this a little bit. That's